July 2015, a month that will live in infamy. Why? Because it was 10 years ago, in July 2015, when DC Comics introduced Jon Kent. Jon Kent was their golden ticket to create something so spectacular, something so fantastic, something that had not been seen in so long. And DC pissed it all away. After they brought in Damian Wayne and everybody just disliked that little bastard, we got Jon Kent. And Jon Kent was supposed to be the stepping stone for DC to elevate this character to such prominence, start to make books, start to make stuff, all of it. But what did they do? They sacrificed Jon Kent on the altar of woke. They sat there and watched that every one of his books just absolutely fell off, got cancelled. Nobody even talks about it. And DC were out there grinning from ear to ear like the Joker and telling everybody, hey, it's fine. Everything is fine. We anticipated this. Don't worry. We know what we're doing. Ah, boy. So yeah, it's, and I was going through, and I found it's been 10 years. I said to myself, let me do this video going over exactly how Jon Kent fell from grace and what DC did to do it. So here we go. When Dan Jurgens introduced Jon Kent in Superman Convergence #2, we had gotten introduced to a character with so much potential. Here was the son of Superman and Lois Lane. He was energetic, he was bright, he had a wonder for the world and everything. All of it was right there. DC had that right there to build on it. And then Peter J. Tomasi developed him in Superman #1. There was so much promise for this character. There was such interest in it that people were like, okay, this is something that we really want to see. This is a character that is giving us something new, something interesting, something exciting. That's what was there. What really put it over the top for fans was Super Sons. Because that book showed that, listen, DC, despite all their years of nonsense they've been doing, can actually make comics. Here were the sons of Superman and Batman. You had Damian Wayne, who originally most people did not really like. That was a fact. People did not like Damian Wayne. But you got him playing off of Jon Kent, who was a little bit more naive, but also, a bit more hopeful and optimistic and stuff like that. And there was this dynamic about them. They were kids, but they had responsibilities. They were doing stuff. It was cool. Fans really got invested in these characters. The art was nice. The stories were interesting. This wasn't any of this whole corporate mandated crap. This was just fun. These were like I said, these were for kids. You know what I mean? They were kids. Jon Kent was a kid, but he was still a superhero. It was good to see him grow. It was good to see him and Damian grow, despite being from two different backgrounds. They got along in their own way. It was fun to watch, and fans really gravitated to it. Fans really enjoyed it. One of the things also that people liked about it was how real Jon Kent felt. He was a kid. He made mistakes. He had to learn certain things. But he was now getting his powers, now learning how to use them, now going out to the world to do certain things. But he was still a 10-year-old kid. You get me? He was new to this. And the dynamic between him and Damian, like I keep mentioning, was one of the things that fans really liked. It was fun. It was interesting. These were actual, real characters that you could say, yes, I am enjoying this. I like this. let's move forward with that. That's what you were getting there. It was it was literal comic gold at that time. Jon Kent sold books just by being Jon Kent. Jon Kent and Damian Wayne and their dynamic, the whole Super Sons thing was fantastic to look at. You were getting new iterations of it was bringing in a whole new generation of readers. It had the potential to do that because it was setting up something interesting. What also made it good is that you got to see different sides of Superman and Batman. I mean, okay, technically Batman has had his sons and stuff over the years, who he's raised and all that, but it was a bit more of a different dynamic when it came to Damien. And, Batman had a tougher time with him because Damien was an assassin. But when you saw him and Jon Kent interacting, two people who couldn't be more different, they became friends. You also got to see the same thing with Superman. Superman had been around for over 80 years. And now you're getting a different side of him as a father, doing stuff, interacting with his son, seeing what's going on. These were stories that were, like I say, were literal comics gold. People were sold on it. They were invested. They liked the character. They liked the dynamic. They liked what was happening. What was really, really grounding about it is that this wasn't, okay, we're bringing in this character to replace the other guy and we gotta give up. No, no. Early on, you were looking at it and you were saying to yourself, listen, Jon Kent could grow into his own. Jon Kent was setting up to become his own hero. There's a possibility that, maybe he might take over as Superman someday, or maybe he might forge his own destiny as an entirely new hero. And then I started to see the cracks. And I said some things, but people weren't really paying attention to it. I mean, I didn't have a YouTube channel back then, but I was saying certain things to people and would say it because when I would go over some of the issues of Super Sons, as it was starting to get a little more into it, I started to realize Jon Kent started to become more and more like a carbon copy of his father. The whole thing that he had before. It was like a mixture of himself, of Superman and Lois Lane with elements of somebody entirely new mixed. But then you started to see it shift more towards Superman centric. And I was like, okay, this is a little one. It wasn't, don't get me wrong, it wasn't big and bold for like everybody to say, well, okay, that would do, but I started to see subtle little cracks there. And then Brian Michael Bendis showed up. Because while DC was touting the whole Bendis is coming, the fans over at Marvel were like, thank God Bendis is leaving. And we all got to see why. He showed up there in 2018, took over from all the work that Peter J. Tomasi had done with Jon Kent. I said, no, I'm going to change him to what I want. And I've said this before, and many people don't believe me. I still believe this was a corporate mandate. I don't think Brian Michael Bendis just showed up and decided he was going to do that alone. I think DC told him when he came on, listen, we want you to do certain things to Jon Kent. And what did he do? He went in there, come up with this ridiculous story where apparently Jor-El comes back, who's like half crazy or some nonsense, decides he wants to take Jon Kent with him into space along with Lois. You understand me? And for some reason, Superman was like, okay, sure, no problem, go. And then we had this whole ridiculous story where Jon Kent got trapped on crime syndicate Earth in a volcano, and Ultraman tortured him for years. And then they had that's basically what he did was age up Jon Kent, destroy years of the character development and work that had been done on the character, and then had the nerve to mock people when they called them out on it. He was out there acting like people being upset about it didn't matter, and basically that he knew better and all of this. But Everybody could see the damage that had been done. You aged up Jon Kent, and that was it because, like I said, I don't think this was just Brian Michael Bendis's idea. DC wanted this because, like I said before, I say again, DC wanted to turn Jon Kent into their own version of Superman. The same way that they basically look to do that with Miles Morales. Coincidentally, Brian Michael Bendis also worked on. So that's telling you that's what was going on. They wanted to turn him into them because once they had this clean slate, they were interested in him growing and progressing as a hero. No, age him up, and then we could do whatever the hell we want with him. I mean, the thing about it is that it wasn't just Jon Kent that Brian Michael Bendis did, because what he did to Superman was also damn downright criminal and worse than anything Lex Luthor could have done. Honestly, he literally nuked Superman's life and was like, yeah, well, that's just storytelling. And then just move on. It was absolute chaos. That was it, chaos. And then Super Sons got cancelled, and it wasn't cancelled because of low sales. People were still buying it, people were invested, people still like the characters. It got cancelled because Brian Michael Bendis came in there and just nuked every freaking thing that was there. Because, like I said, DC didn't have any interest in doing that. You see, Super Sons was doing something DC didn't like. It was getting readers interested. And DC didn't want that. DC wanted to preach and lecture to them. Fans were interested in Super Sons because it was a fun comic. It was interesting. It was great to see these two characters growing, developing. Even I was saying to myself, you know what would have been a really good thing to do? Have these characters grow and develop a few more years and then start like a superhero team. Sort of like how Young Justice was, because Young Justice was very popular for its time. You could have done that, but they were like, no, let's age up Jon Kent and then go to work destroying every damn thing that we could. So, what did Brian Michael Bendis decide to replace the Super Sons with? Basically, a Legion of Superheroes book where they were basically out there trying to say, like, Jon Kent was leading the Legion of Superheroes in the future. Yes, he was kissing Saturn Girl, and you could tell she had the hot swim and all kind of stuff like that. But it wasn't enough to bring back readers because there was no progression. The absolute bullshit of it all had started, where you were just basically handing him everything and acting like, okay, here, take this, do that. There wasn't any work to be done. There was nothing, and this is what DC was banking on. They wanted this character to just be able to be their everyman. He could just be anything that they wanted. Throw him into this situation, throw him into that situation, pelt him over there, throw him over so, run him up there, pelt him there, throw him there, throw him there. And that was what was going on, and fans were getting very, very pissed about it. Very pissed. It was just destructive. But it did not get better from there. Oh no, it got worse. Much, much worse. When Tom Taylor took over the book, that's when the damage became completely unfixable. The first thing that Tom Taylor took over the book was basically change Jon Kent from who he was to that basically a mouthpiece for every problem anybody who was working at DC had. You basically had Jon Kent telling his father to know, you should do more. You should be out there fixing the housing crisis and crap like that. And I was like, okay, listen, you little shit. Superman has saved the universe countless times. You haven't done a damn thing. Shut your freaking mouth. But it kept getting worse from there. You had Jon Kent going out on all kind of protest marches and things with all kind of signs. They on this one balloon stupid sign. There's no Earth B or planet B or whatever like that. In a multiverse where they actually are. It was nonsensical. You had basically Jon Kent protesting climate change when he could literally do something to fix it. But no, you could see it at that point. They were just using the character as a mouthpiece for every political thing that they wanted to say. And the sales were absolutely atrocious. Nobody liked it. The sales were horrible. They were getting worse and worse and worse. So, of course, they had to do something drastic. By the time issue 5 rolled around, Tom Taylor made a big announcement. Jon Kent is bisexual. We all know it's gay. Jon Kent is bisexual, and he had the shirt with the Superman logo and the rainbow flag thing on it and all of that. And the whole thing was done just to get press. That was it. This was the same Tom Taylor who started off saying, he's going to honor the legacy of Jon Kent and all of that. You did it just to get headlines. And don't get me wrong, there was a stark rise in the sales when it came to issue 5. You know why? Because everybody wanted to own the book that DC used to shoot themselves in the foot. Nobody was talking about how good Jon Kent was. Nobody was talking about how amazing the stories are. No, everybody was talking about, you know what? They make Superman gay. That was the whole thing, because they had sent Superman awful. Jon Kent's Superman book was not the flagship DC book, and this is what they were doing. They were painting that all over town, and acting like everybody needed to get in on this. That was what it was. Tom Taylor was making the rounds on every news site he could to prop it up, and DC were perfectly happy to let him. And when these things started to roll around, I saw what's going on. I talked about it from back in Super Sons, and I started to see the cracks. Then when Brian Michael Bendis came along, and now Tom Taylor, these things were not done by accident. DC engineered these things. They brought in Brian Michael Bendis to age of the character and destroy everything that was attached to Super Sons. Then they brought on Tom Taylor to turn him into a pride parade. That was it. It was 18 issues. 18 issues of turning Jon Kent into a pride parade outlet for everything. He was coming out to everybody. His father, his mother, his grandparents, crypto, the news, Batman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, everybody he could think to, he was coming out to. That was all the character became, as all the character remains till this day. The really ridiculous part about it is that Tom Taylor came out and said that, it was always planned to do that with Jon Kent, contradicting everything that DC was doing. Because when they had the whole future state thing with DC, and they had Jon Kent and Yara Flor in the future, they were boyfriend and girlfriend. You had the thing with the Legion of Superheroes where Jon Kent and Saturn Girl spent the entire time flirting, rubbing up each other and all kind of thing. Even when Jon Kent was a kid, he had a girl who was living close by to him that he actually really liked. So there was never anything to indicate any of this so-called, he's bisexual nonsense. But they just needed an outlet to just keep pushing their crap. That was all that was going on. And by doing so, they exposed themselves. After issue 5, where the big reveal, and like I say, people were buying that book because they wanted to own the book that DC used to shoot themselves in the foot. When it came to issue 6, people were still peeping to see anything else. Is the dog gonna get in on this? What's going on? We don't know. But the sales fell off a cliff hard, and you had Tom Taylor out there lying his face off about it's the #1 selling book on Amazon. And I actually did a video where I checked the top 100 to top 200 books on Amazon, and you couldn't find it anywhere. It was not there. It was not there at all. Nobody was reading that crap. Everybody was sick and tired of what they had done by that point. So where does that leave Jon Kent now? He is a shell of anything that resembles a hero He never got the chance to be one. And it's just the all Jon Kent is now is just a pride poster boy. That's it. They won't let the character have a book because, Tom Taylor's run was 18 issues and they canceled the living hell out of that. They brought back some pathetic miniseries that did nothing to answer anything. You had Jon Kent hugging Ultraman, all this crap, like anybody was supposed to care. You understand me? He finally broke up with, or should I say, Jay Nakamura finally broke up with him, and nobody gave a shit. If somebody didn't tell me about it, I wouldn't have even known about it. That's how terrible this is. After that, they were promoting these two like the greatest things since sliced bread. Nobody gave a shit that he broke up, but no. Now they want him to get with Dreamer, a transgender hero, because that's all Jon Kent is now. And it's all he is now. So yes, DC Comics betrayed and lied to everybody. Jon Kent was one of the hottest properties that they had in years, and they squandered it, destroyed the character, destroyed his legacy, destroyed everything. Super Sons had the potential to be great and to build and create new stories, and DC sacrificed that, sacrificed sales, and more importantly, sacrificed Jon Kent on the altar of woke. 10 years later, and it's still freaking awful. Let me know your thoughts on this in the comments. If you have a different opinion, I'd love to hear it. If you like the video, hit that thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already. Ring the notification bell to be notified every time I put a new video. And I shall see you all next time. Take care.